Good morning, hello and welcome to Inga's Welt. Today I would like to introduce myself and explain to you how and why I got the ducks, why I rescued them, how I incubated them, and if I would do something differently if I had to do it again. Right, so I just took out the ducks, they're swimming behind me. Maybe you will see them in this camera, I'm not sure. I should probably start by introducing myself. My name is Inga Rodem. I come from a town near Frankfurt and I'm 22 years old and I just finished my bachelor's degree at University of Frankfurt and I'm going to start my master's degree in October. So it fits quite perfectly. I got some time to raise the ducks because they're honestly a full-time job. So last year, while we cleaned up our garden in spring, we had discovered that some ducks laid some eggs right next to our pond and they had started their nest. Now legally you aren't allowed to do anything against it, and honestly we were quite happy about it because it was the beginning of the corona year, I'd say, and nothing much was about to happen. So we were proud to have the ducks here to, I don't know, get us a bit of change. So 10 little ducklings hatched last year. And I discovered my love and my passion for wildlife photography, or I'm not sure if you could call it wildlife if they're in my pond, but like animal photography. And I love that very much. I spend a lot of time with them and they remained wild all the time. Like they weren't getting used to me at all or anything. They would stay around their mother would be very protective about them. Yeah, but then we had them here and they learned to fly at some point and then sooner or later they were all gone. There was one smaller one who stayed in our pond for a bit longer and he learned to fly a lot later as well. And in the end he came to visit me every day in the morning to get some breakfast here, and then he would fly off. Sometimes he would bring some friends. It was such a cute experience. But in the end I was quite happy and I always made sure that he remained wild and he wasn't relying on the food that I was giving him. So that was very important to me and I think it worked quite well because I think by the end of September he stopped coming. And so that's that. That's the story from the ducks last year, and that's how I guess the ducks discovered our pond here, because I mean they were here before, but it was the first time that they tried to breed here. And now when the ducks came back in spring this year, we decided to cut the grasses very early because we weren't sure if we wanted to have ducks for another year because of the state the pond was in after they left. So we cut it very early, just to make it a little bit harder for them to find a spot where they could lay their eggs. But in the end we also said that if they came back and if they really started to lay their nest there, that we wouldn't bother him. Also you aren't allowed to bother them anyway. So then we would just leave them alone. And that's exactly what happened. So a week before Easter the ducks laid their first egg, and it wasn't really in a bush or anything, it was out in the open, and we were quite intrigued if that would work out at all because there wasn't any protection for the eggs. So the following days the ducks came back every morning and laid one egg, because that's how ducks breed. They lay one egg every day until they have like 10 to 15 eggs, and then they start breeding for 28 days and they hatch all at the same time. That's how it usually works, but this year they only laid 4 eggs and then they didn't come back anymore. And every morning I got out and I was hoping for another egg because I hoped that the ducks had come back, but they didn't. So Easter came and the weather forecast said that it was going to be below 0 for some nights, and I read up online that that would kill the eggs and the potential embryos inside. So I made a decision and I took the eggs out of the nest and I replaced them with chicken eggs, because I was hoping that the mother duck would just come back someday and continue laying her eggs, and then I would swap them out again, of course. But she didn't, and the next morning all 4 eggs were gone, and I was quite happy that I rescued the duck eggs because they would probably be gone as well. We set up a camera and we saw several species that came by that might have taken the eggs. So yeah, in the end I had 4 eggs. One of them had a little crack though, so I couldn't do anything with it. But then I ordered an incubator online on Amazon. I took the cheapest option that could hold up to 4 eggs, although I must say, never ever can 4 ducklings or chickens hatch in that little thing. It's just way too small. Now, I did buy that and started incubating a couple of days later. Up to that point, I read up a lot online, and I was becoming quite the expert about incubating, I felt. But there's so much information out there, and it's always the question, who will you trust? What information is the correct one? Which one does apply to you and your breeder? So the most common advice that I've read was that the temperature needed to be 37.5 to 38.5 degrees. So I tried to keep mine around 38. And the humidity is supposed to be between 50 to 60, some say, but others say it should be between 60 and 70. And then towards the hatching period, it should be around 80%. So I think in the beginning I mostly had mine around 60 to 70%. So to my incubator I did add a thermometer and a hygrometer to just double check the temperature settings. And also my incubator didn't have any settings for the humidity. So I put in some sponges to raise the humidity, and I checked that very frequently to make sure it's all right. And I filled up the water regularly as well to keep it high. Starting from day 5, I took them out in the evenings and I cooled them for 15 minutes. And then I sprayed them with water and put them back into the incubator. That is to imitate the behavior of the mother duck, who would fly away and eat somewhere else and then come back and start breathing the eggs again. And then her feathers would be wet when she would come back. So that's why I did that. And then on day 4, you could already see some development, which I was so intrigued in, because I rescued those duck eggs, but I didn't actually think that it would work out. So I could clearly see some development, and that was so exciting. And in all 3 of them, I could see the heartbeat, and throughout the following days, I could see more and more development. And until at some point there would be small embryos that would actually start moving and you could see them. And then with a lot of patience, some more days passed and you could start to see their little feet. And that was so fascinating to me, because I just took that little egg, and from the outside it still looked like that little egg, but in the inside a duckling grew, and that was so fascinating. I hope you all get that. Towards the later stages of the incubation period, I started to prepare myself for the ducks, because I knew that I would have to take care of them as well as soon as they hatch. Now that wasn't really so difficult for me to prepare, because all of my life I have had guinea pigs, and we have a lot of cages of them still standing around here. So all of the equipment we mostly already had. So I prepared the cage, and I was getting more and more excited and nervous for the hatching period, because I have read so much online about what can all go wrong, and of course it had to happen. But on day 26 things started to get a bit worse, because from 1 hour to the next I couldn't see the veins anymore and I couldn't see any movement. So that was quite devastating to me. I left it in overnight just to make sure that before I take it out I don't accidentally kill any duckling. So in the morning there still was no change, and I took the egg out of the incubator and I opened it, and it was just this perfect little duckling inside. He just didn't absorb the yolk sac, but other than that he looked like a perfect duckling to me, and that was quite devastating to just have a fully developed duckling die inside there, and you have no idea what went wrong. You could have done nothing at that point because he didn't even pip. So that was quite sad. The other 2 at this point looked still pretty good, and there was movement in there. I mean, just to explain, when I say there wasn't any movement in there, it doesn't mean that I took them out all the time to candle them, but my incubator was so small and the eggs were right on the sides of it that I could just take the torch and light it up from the side, and I could actually see movement or no movement without actually opening up the incubator, which was quite good, because otherwise the humidity could drop down and that would not be good for their hatching. So I took care of that. But then, the other 2 seemed fine until the next night. It was the same thing happening again. From 1 hour to the next, there was no movement in there as well. And this egg did internally pip, so it was in the air sac, but it didn't manage to come out of it at all. I don't know if I could have done anything any sooner. I mean, I'm inexperienced. It was the first time that I tried something like this. So I did have a small air hole in the air sac because it was in there for, I think, 24 hours. And I've read online that if they are in there for 24 hours without making any progress, that you can start to help them a little bit. So that's what I did. It didn't seem to have helped. And I had to let it go as well. It was the same story as with the other duckling. It was perfectly developed, but it just didn't make it. It was too weak. Now, after the other 2 ducklings had died, fully developed in their shell, I didn't want to watch the same thing happening again with the 3rd duckling, so I intervened sooner. And you can find that story in a separate video, which I'm going to link up there. In that video, I also mentioned that we got her some company. So by now we have 5 ducks running around here, 5 little ducks. They're not fully developed yet. And little Elsa has grown into a wonderful little duck. She is still only weighing half the amount of the others, but she's doing quite fine. So I'm really happy about that because it didn't look like it in that night. It was quite horrible to watch, but she did make it and I'm so happy about that. Now, to just put a disclaimer here, I am no expert at all. It was the first time that I incubated duck eggs, and I'm not sure if the way that I rescued her out of the egg was the way to do it as well. I've read a lot about it online, when to intervene, when not to intervene, but I guess as soon as you're doing it, it's very different from what you read online. Also, you're quite emotional about it because you put so much work and effort into that little duckling. You kept it alive for the last 28 hours artificially, to then lose it in just a blink of an eye. That's quite sad. What remains so fascinating to me is how a mother duck will do all of these things that I did, checking the humidity, checking the temperature and all of that. She will do that by herself intuitively, and nobody has to tell her how to do it. I guess a real duck is just the best mother duck that could be there, and I'm just a replacement, and I tried my best. I'm still happy about Elsa coming out of the egg. That was more than I had hoped for. And now I did have some people come up to me in the past few days and say that the fact that I took the eggs out of the nest wasn't quite legally right. Now, while that might be true, it's too late to change anything now. Elsa has already grown and her friends as well, so I guess it's just the way it is now. And my aim for raising these ducklings though is to eventually release them into the wild. I mean, they are in the wild here, they're not locked up or anything. Well, they're in a pond, so as soon as they can fly, they're free to go away. They're free to come back as well, but eventually I am the happiest if they can survive in the wild without any help of me or other humans. So that's the main goal, to release them in the wild. So that's it from me for today. If you have any questions about the story I just told you, please feel free to leave a comment and I'm going to get back in touch with you. If you want to stay updated with all the duckling content that is still to come, please subscribe to my channel and stay happy and healthy, and see you next time. Come here. No, that would be too perfect, huh?